Hey ladies, I'm Sandeep and welcome to this clarity video where we're going to be unpacking a feature from the Spring/Summer 2020 edition of Clarity magazine. So I hope you got your hands on it, ladies. We're going to be looking at a feature written by Stephanie Payne about whether Jesus was a feminist, and we're going to be looking at 3 ways that Jesus showed that he valued women equal to men. Number 1 is where Jesus was at the home of Martha and Mary. So here's what happened in the story. So Jesus went to the home of Martha and Mary, and he was there chilling with a load of people that were there. Most likely he was teaching them at the time. Now Martha was in the kitchen. She was probably preparing food, she was doing a bit of housework, and she noticed that her sister Mary was sat at the feet of Jesus, just chilling. She was getting involved in the conversation, she was just chilling there listening to Jesus. Now this got Martha pretty frustrated, and actually ended up Martha going over to Jesus to be like, Lord, what is going on? Why are you not telling Mary to come help me with all the work that we've got to do? And you know what Jesus' response was? He responded asking Martha, why do you worry? Don't you see that Mary has actually found the greatest treasure, which is so worthwhile? She has found Jesus himself, and she was there giving her time to Jesus. Now let's break down a bit of the context that was happening at the time of this story. So Jesus was most likely at that house teaching the men, and so at the time the social cultural norms was that the women would be serving the guests and the guests were men that were listening to Jesus, so they were involved in the teachings and listening to him. Now what happened was Mary was doing her place, which was to serve the guests, but what Mary did was she broke out of that cultural norm and she went to be an equal par with the men, to sit at the feet of Jesus and to listen to him and to be engaged in listening to him and his teaching. Now, what Jesus' response, and what is so incredible about his response, is that he didn't scold Martha for coming with all her frustration and her annoyance. He actually sat there, listened to her and acknowledged her feelings. He sat there and acknowledged, why do you worry, he asked. So he acknowledged that she was feeling worried, she was feeling frustrated, she was probably tired as well from having to serve all these guests. But yet he didn't scold her for that. He actually acknowledged her feelings. And what he then goes on to do is that actually he shares with Martha the treasure and the secret, which is that they're allowed to be in that place to listen to him as much as the men. And what an incredible invitation we have to come and sit at the feet of Jesus. Jesus wasn't bound by social cultural norms. He broke through them too, so that we could get even more of him and be invited into his presence. So the real question is, what's our response to that? Knowing that we've all got an invitation to sit at the feet of Jesus and listen to him, what's our response going to be as women? Are we going to listen, or are we going to make ourselves really busy and just get on with the 10 million other things that we need to do? That's the real question. Number 2 is where Jesus talks to the Samaritan woman at the well. Now here's what happens in this story. Jesus needs to go to the well to get some water. Now he goes during the middle of the day to the well and he meets this Samaritan woman who's also at the well drawing water. So she's there alone because all the people would have drawn water earlier in the day. Now she's there drawing water, and what Jesus does is he asks her to draw the water for him. And she responds and says, how can you, a Jewish man, ask me, a Samaritan woman, to draw you water? And Jesus then responds by talking more and engaging in a dialogue with her, and actually going on to share details of her life about herself that she had not even disclosed to him. And so then what happens is that she then realises there is something more about this man than what meets the eye, and that he is more than what any of the men she's met. And he goes on to share with her and says, the 5 men you're married with, the one you're married to now is not even your husband. I mean, imagine Jesus comes and just tells you about yourself like that and explains and just goes directly into the flaws of your life. That's insane. But yet Jesus could do that in a really gentle way. And at the end of this story, the woman actually ends up going to her town, telling everyone about this man Jesus that she met and the amazing things that he spoke to her about his water being even more life-giving than any water we could drink here on earth. That he himself is the life-giving water. How incredible is that? And so if we break down the context of what's happening here, is that we see that there's a massive divide between Jewish people and Samaritans. You could call it modern day segregation. That's what you could call it. So the Jews and the Samaritan people were always separate. They never mingled. and there was quite an animosity between the two groups. Now what we see Jesus doing here is that he actually cuts through those social barriers. Again, it's a pattern we see with Jesus constantly, and this is how he reaches his people, particularly women. So he breaks through these norms, and he then goes and speaks to the Samaritan woman. It wasn't enough that she was a woman, but she was a Samaritan woman, and he broke through those social barriers to engage in dialogue with her. And what's even more is that Jesus really exposed the very core flaws of this woman's life and the very things that she struggled with. But yet he did not do it with judgment. He did it, he sat there, he saw her for who she was. But then what does he do? He engages and tells her about the freedom that she can have through this life-giving water, which is himself. How incredible is that? So he exposes this deep flaw, but then he shows her that he is right there with her in that, and he is offering her a way out, a freedom that she can have. And so we see why the woman then went to her town sharing about this incredible man Jesus that she'd met, because he told her about herself and then given her the life-giving freedom solution that she just so desperately didn't even realise probably that she needed. And this woman actually became the first evangelist that we read of in the Gospels. How incredible is that? Jesus elevated a Samaritan woman to be the first evangelist in the Gospels that we can read about. And that is one way in which Jesus showed that he elevates women and is for women. And number 3 is where Jesus defended the adulterous woman. So let's have a look at this story. Now what happened here is that Jesus was outside the temple, and randomly all the leaders and the Pharisees brought out this random woman who had just been caught in the act of adultery. She'd been cheating on her man. So they brought her out and threw her in front of Jesus, and they asked Jesus a question to try and trick him to do with the law of Moses and answering what they should do with her. So they said to Jesus, "The law of Moses says that we should stone her. What do you say we do?" And Jesus' response was astonishing. He took his time, he thought for a moment, and then he said to them, "You who have no sin can cast the first stone." And one by one those men slowly shrunk away, because none of them were without sin. Each one of them were flawed, were broken, were with sin, and so they could not condemn her. And so each of them shrunk away, where Jesus was the only one left with this woman. And she turns around to Jesus and she says, "Do you condemn me?" And he replies and says, "Do they condemn you?" She says, "No." He says, "Well, neither do I. Go and sin no more. Leave your life of sin." So let's have a look at the context here. So this is a very dramatic moment that happens where this woman is dragged after being caught cheating on her husband. Very dramatic, very embarrassing. I would not want to be that woman. Now, the way Jesus responded was with compassion, wisdom, and gentleness. He saw the woman for what she was and what had happened, and for her actions, he saw everything. And so did all these other men. But yet his compassion and his wisdom went hand in hand to create this scenario where actually no one could condemn her. He showed how this woman's actions were equal to the sins of anyone else. He showed up on humanity's scale all the sin of humanity. He didn't elevate one sin over another. He showed that they were all equal. Did that denounce what she'd done? Not at all. But when she asked Jesus, "Do you condemn me?" he responded that he didn't, but actually instead gave her freedom. And he lifted the woman into giving her freedom from her situation that she'd been in. That is powerful. That encounter of wisdom and compassion from Jesus was the very thing that changed that woman, that actually enabled her to look at what she'd done, but actually walk away from those actions and repent. So thanks for joining, ladies. Hope you enjoyed this video, and if you haven't got your hands on a Clarity magazine yet, make sure you head to our website claritymag.co.uk to get your hands on the latest issue or any of the other issues as well. And make sure that you get us on social media as well. We'd love to connect with you and hear about how Clarity has impacted you or just what you love about us. So hit us up. Thanks for joining me today. See you later.